Okay, welcome to our sixth session of 12, and we're going to be on circuit planning this evening. And our objectives this evening: to find the purpose of the circuit as well as describe the various parts. And it's going to be very clear on this. It's not about how to fly the circuit. So we're not going to be going through how to actually fly it. It's really about planning the circuit and creating that. Thought I'd start off with this opening quote from Colonel Chris Hadfield. This is pulled from an upcoming article in Free Flight where we interviewed him about his flying experience, and we talked about how he got his start with air cadets. Gravity is going to win, and there's an inevitable upcoming landing that you have one try at. There's a great discipline to it. So, you know, when we're thinking about circuit planning, we really want to make sure that we've thought that through, we've planned it ahead, and we're ready for that upcoming approach. So I just thought I would, I Googled circuit plan and found the electronic brain stimulator. So if any electronics out there want to, build this and see if it works, let me know. Okay, so I posed the question: what is a circuit? In the US, they often refer to it as a pattern. Let's see what, let's see what some people are saying here. From Dane: a predetermined route for takeoff and landing. Interesting. Agreed. And our focus this evening is going to be on the landing circuit. But you're right, there is actually kind of a circuit for the takeoff as well. Tom: a pattern which we use to operate a safe airport and landing process. Absolutely. And safety is a very key thing. From Kevin: a path to a successful landing. And I love that description, Kevin, because we're going to talk a little bit about, what's the purpose of the circuit in a moment. But I often say, your good landing starts with a good circuit. So if we have a good circuit, we're going to be getting into a better landing. From Razvan: usual traffic pattern followed by aircraft during approach and landing. That sounded very Googled, but yes, you're bang on. Textbook answer there. A planned route that will take us to a hopefully good landing, and the hopefully is in quotes, Sergio, absolutely. So we've all got a good understanding for what a circuit is. Now, my next question for you is what is the purpose of the circuit? So I'll give everyone just a few moments to respond to that. Okay, we got some answers coming in. All right, let's take a look at what we've got here. Sorry, I'm just clearing off the previous answers. And yeah, Dane says safety would be paramount, absolutely. So from Chris: an easy and successful landing. Yep, and then of course we've got also define what the heck successful means. To set the pilot to the current weather, traffic conditions, for a safe landing. Absolutely, great description there. There we go, that's better. Let's see what else we got. To position the aircraft for landing while allowing time to prepare for the landing, from Neil. Absolutely, very good answer. Yeah, so we want to set the airplane in the right place, prepare for that landing, so everyone follows the same rules and procedures, from Tom. Absolutely. And Tom, I'm going to guess that what you're really talking about there is around safety, so that we're all kind of following the same rules. Ensure that all the parameters necessary for successful landing are in place, from Kevin. Yes, totally. And some of those parameters, things like is your wheel down, is your flaps set, are you at the right speed, and so forth. Avoid accidents on approach, allowing time for lookout and checks. To be able to have a good view of the landing site, the traffic, being able to land into the wind. Absolutely. So everyone's on the same page. Facilitate multiple aircraft. Yes, you guys are all over this. This is fantastic. Okay. And I love Dave's answer. One word: predictability. Yeah, so if we just pop back over to here for a second, a great way to describe a circuit. it's all about getting you in the right place, at the right height, at the right speed. And you get those three factors, and the right place is, over the end of the runway. The right height, the 50 feet, 10 feet, whatever that is for your runway, and at the right speed, so you're not going too fast, but you're also not going too slow. I remember early in my flight training coming into land one day, and I think I was still a student at the time, and I flared and I pulled back on the stick and the airplane rotated and then it slammed into the ground. And he said to my instructor, it's like, well, what happened? He says, well, that's what happens when you flare with no airspeed. Because what I had done is I'd let the airspeed bleed off, and when it went to rotate, there was no energy there to prevent the descent. And fortunately it wasn't bad enough that there was any damage. It was just uncomfortable, but learn from that exercise. Other big factor, safety. You know what to expect from others, and they know what to expect from you. So we talked a little bit about that, and I think, Dave, you summed it up very well when you said predictability, right? Here it is, there we go. Yeah, so predictability. And, we all know what we're doing. Other people know what you're doing, you know what they're doing. And, we have that predictability so we can kind of plan, execute on that plan, and kind of know where we're all at. So I have a couple of videos that I wanted to show you. And what I want to do is get you to chime in and judge whether this was a good or bad landing. And I want you to, as you're watching that, I want you to kind of look at what the approach is like and kind of, put some descriptors around the approach that you're seeing. So while we're watching this, you can describe it and just pop into the question box and type in your comments. So I'm hoping everyone can see the video okay. If you're having any difficulty, just chime in and let me know. Let me just restart it here. I'll just back it up just a little bit. Okay. Now, other than his choice of surface, yeah, salty. Other than his choice of surface, I'd like you to kind of judge what the approach and the landing was like. Oh, Sully. Sergio said Sully. Yeah, maybe this was Sully Sullenberger's training. And yes, he did get out and was walked away from it. I also edited the video. If you Google it online, it continues, and you see the airplane floating there for about a minute or so before the video finishes. So what I'm seeing is great landing from Svetvan. He says, I hope he unbuckled. Smooth, absolutely. And this is one of the things that I looked at this video, and in preparation for this session, I Googled on YouTube, and I was trying to find a good video. Oh, Dane's saying he can't hear me. Yeah, so good landing, looks good. So I'm guessing I might be having some internet issues. All right, looks good, good landing. Yeah, bad if there's a strip 100 meters ahead, but excellent if he had no choice. Absolutely. So, we look at this landing here, and other than the material of the runway that he chose, i.e., he's not on land, he's on water. This was actually a fantastic landing. And Dane's saying still no audio. Okay, I'm just going to unmute Dane for a second here. Dane, can... Okay, doesn't want to unmute. Dave Bradley, can you hear me?
Yes, I can at the moment.
All right.
Fine.
I think it's a problem with Dane.
No problem.
All right. Neil, can you hear me?
Yep.
Yeah, okay, good. I think it's Dane. All right. Um, I will send him a note. Um, yeah, I like that one. Yeah, bad landing if there's a, asphalt 100 meters ahead. Um, yeah, it was actually a really, really good landing. So, why did I pick this one? Because I Googled and I looked for a really, really good landing, and this was the best I could find because all of the other shots are from inside the cockpit, and I really wanted a shot from outside. All right, so let's move on to the next one because I have another one here, and I'm going to play this one. And again, I want you to watch it and then chime in on your thoughts. Okay, so let's get this guy rolling. Oh, what the heck happened? Sorry. I'm going to restart it because it seems I was clicking off on something. Anyways. Oh, alrighty. Let's hear from. Yeah, the comments are already coming fast and furious here. All right, let's take a look. Sorry, Dane. Let me just. I'm just going to type a note to Dane because he's still saying no audio. All right, let's just send that to him. Okay, so what do we got here? I hear you 5. I think it's on your end from Razvan. Okay. So first comment that came in, PIO, right, which is pilot-induced oscillation. Reminds me of my 2-year-old son when I asked him to show me how does a frog do. Love it. Yeah, not the pilot's best day. So it was a bad landing. He was lucky. He was lucky, absolutely. And I think, Tom, you summed it up beautifully here. First of all, the first half of his answer was out of control. So, really quickly here, this guy was not in control. And then the second half, he said, is too fast, right? Now, Rezvan, you're right. Every landing you survive is a great one. Anyone you can use the airplane again is good. But, what we want to do is get these a lot better because he was very lucky, right? Yeah, we have all had such landings, though at least once or twice in our experience. Yeah, absolutely. And Pavel is chiming in and saying looks too fast. Now I'm just going to replay this again for a second. And first of all, whoops, wow, what happened there? No, I don't want to do that. All right, let me just replay this for a sec. Now notice where he's pointing, first of all. So this video has been taken from off to the side of the runway. A fair distance off. And you notice he's pointing straight at the camera. So he's not lined up with the runway at all. Now let's continue for a second. And if you watch the video up until this point, you think, oh, he's in a crosswind until you get to this frame. And you notice, yeah, there's no wind. I mean, he's coming in on pretty much a no-wind day. And he's pointing way off to the side. And then, of course, we come down here to the flare, and you can see the attitude he's in. Well, he's not really slipping, though, Neil, because he would need to have the wing down. He is kind of slipping, but he's skidding is what he's actually doing. So he's kicked a bit of rudder over. The airplane is pointing in the wrong direction, and it is going sideways through the air. But with that aircraft, pull your spoilers. Like, yeah, he is fast. Spoilers not deployed. Absolutely. Now, you notice what happens right here is he rotates. Now, he's actually in a perfect attitude for landing. The nose is a little bit up, the tail's a little bit down, but there's so much energy right now that he just balloons up. So this, to me, from what I see, looks like a classic scenario of he came in with too much speed. He pulled back on the stick like he always does to come in and land, and just ballooned up, and then of course things just unraveled from there, overcorrected on the push down, which slammed it into the ground, and just continued to, fortunately he kind of gets it back under control, but again he keeps pointing off to the right, and of course when the wheel kicks in, then he starts going in that direction. Oh, darn it, sorry. Now I don't know if you noticed. Let me see if I can just catch the frame. Need to go back just a hair. Okay. And you can just see it there, but his hand comes off the stick. So just about there, you can just see his hand pop up. Right there, you see his hand up. Yeah, and I don't see any rudder either, so I'm not sure why he keeps going to the right there. I really haven't figured that part out. But it's almost like the airplane's not being flown, He came into, no, there's no pilot in the back. He comes in too fast. He comes in with no spoiler, too much speed, tries to flare, and then, so you can see right there, there's no pilot in the back. He is solo. And just doesn't fly the airplane. So he manages to sort of get it back under control here, and then, again, still turning to the right and eventually encountering the tree. Okay, moving on to a better one. So what do we learn from that? Well, here's a good example of what happens when you don't arrive over the field at the right height, at the right speed. So he arrived a little bit too high, a little bit too fast. From what I'm seeing, it looks like he's diving for the field, and again, not pulling those air brakes out soon enough. Okay, so let's take a look at our third one here. Now this was actually a kind of windy day, so it was actually pretty gusty that day. And unfortunately with my software we don't get any audio on the videos, so but there's really nothing to hear on this one. So this is a DG 505 in Hope, BC. Okay, so I'll let you guys chime in on the comments for that one. Dave Bradley says I'm still stuck on the old clip. So good landing, took his time, very stabilized approach, textbook, Dane is saying. Looked routine, however, the final glide looked low. Keeping in mind, Chris, it is a DG 505, and the camera was actually zoomed in a little bit, so it was a little bit deceiving there. Okay, but he was fast and didn't use spoilers soon enough. Okay, so would you say it was a stabilized approach? And it was nice and smooth. The reason the pilot didn't use spoilers is because he was bleeding off the energy to create a lower energy touchdown. Okay. So yeah, could have used spoilers a little bit sooner and brought it down a little bit shorter. But there's also like 4,000 feet of runway there. Makes sense about the low, yeah. It was also a very windy day, so I did come in with a little bit of extra speed. Yeah, so that was me. Oh, Svetvan has sent me a YouTube link, so I will have to see if I can copy that somewhere and get it going. What are we looking at here, Svetvan, that you sent me? I'm scared to show it. What do we got? Oh yeah, this one. Yeah, this was one that I also considered. So this is a, and I forget where it is, but it's somewhere I think in Norway, if I remember correctly. And as you can see, the wind is just blowing a gale. And this is also a DG 505 coming into land. And it's very gusty, you can hear on the audio. Now he put it down on the ground a little bit more aggressively because with that kind of a wind, you want to get yourself down and kind of safe. Yeah, so nice one. All right, back to our regularly scheduled program. Okay, so I'm going to pose this. Yeah, wow, Neil says. I'm going to pose this question for you, and what we'll do is we'll get into the stages of the circuit. We'll talk about one or two of them, and then kind of do our break. So I'm going to pose this question: what are the stages or parts of a circuit? So again, we'll get you to just chime in on the question part, and if you want to just type in one or two of them, or list them all, that'd be great. Either one. And they don't have to be in order. So kind of picture the circuit in your mind. You're kind of going through it. What are the different parts or pieces? Dave Bradley, you got your hand up. What's up?
Oh, sorry, I forgot to put it down.
No problem. All right, I'm going to mute you. Dane says, copy them from the handout, ha ha ha. All right, so we got some things coming in, like high key, downwind, 45-degree turn, base leg, approach, landing, downwind entry leg, turn to base leg, turn to final landing, high key, downwind leg, low key point, diagonal leg, base leg. Sergio, you've got like a textbook answer here, final approach, entry 1 and 2, downwind 3, turn to base 4, final 5, high key, downwind, absolutely. So we've all got kind of a good idea. I'm going to read off Kevin's because this is a really good one. High key area, swaths, which is actually swaths with an S on the end. Low key point, diagonal, base. I'm guessing that's, final. Sorry, base leg, final. Flare, hands on stick until stop. Okay, so that's actually really key. And thank you for that, because we often focus on things like the high key area and downwind and diagonal base and final and all that kind of stuff, but you want to include as one of the stages in your circuit is the stop, because you need to keep flying that airplane all the way until it is stopped. And I've seen this happen many times where, and I think that second video is kind of a classic example. It really looks like in the video that he actually stopped flying the plane, and you keep flying that plane until it has actually fully come to a complete stop. Something we used to do in Air Cadets when I first trained, and here's a bunch of young, keen, super eager kids, and we would just keep flying that airplane, and on windy days we'd have a little contest to see how long we could hold the wings level. And for us it was kind of an achievement when we could stop the airplane, keep the wings level until someone walked over and grabbed a wingtip. There was one day when it was actually too windy to fly. The crosswind was too high, so we turned the airplanes, pointed them into the wind, and sat on the ground holding the wings level, joking that we were going to be able to log this. So we do want to look at, the planning of the circuit, the prepping, the whole, high key area, downwind, low key point, all of those important pieces. But keep in mind, you keep flying that airplane all the way until it stops. Okay, just keep the mind active, keep the thought process going, and just keep flying that plane, because the last thing you want to do is kind of stop flying it before the airplane stopped moving, and then hence it's kind of out of control. Okay, so we've already kind of hit upon them. The high key area. Now notice that the high key area is just that. It's a nice big wide area, right? The downwind leg and then the low key point, which really is a specific spot, and it's actually, you know, straight abeam the reference point. Ideally, we want to be landing into wind, but of course you can't always do downwind landings, and we'll discuss those kind of near the end. So we start off our circuit, our downwind leg to our high key, or our low key point, excuse me. This is a key decision-making point. We get the 45 or diagonal leg, the base leg, and then finally, of course, the final leg. Now, one other piece on this drawing that I really wanted to point out was this piece here, the alternate landing area. And whenever you're coming into land, you always want to have, as much as possible, an alternate. And that alternate may be in the form of it is, you know, way down the runway. So let's say we've got, you know, 5,000 feet of runway, and there's an obstruction. So let's say there's, you know, an obstruction right here where we're going to land. Well, you know, we close our spoilers, we extend our glide, and we move our reference point down here and land past that, right, is one potential option. You know, the other option is that, you know, we're here on kind of short final, and we do a little less turn and, you know, and land here. You want to, as much as possible, give yourself options. Now, of course, the further down the runway you go, the further down the circuit you go, the further down your final that you go, the less options you're going to have. And this kind of all brings us back to that high key point, because one of the key things you need to be doing on the high key point, and you should be doing this down the whole downwind of your runway, is you need to be looking at the runway. You know, you need to look here, look here. Now, as you're kind of, you know, coming down the runway or down the downwind, you can look at the runway and see how it's, you know, is it clear? Is there obstructions? Is there, you know, a tow pilot sitting there hooking up to a glider about to take off, right? So, you know, you get to that low key point, you know, you want to be really clear as to what is the condition of your runway as you come into land, so that you can, you know, make those decisions, because my alternate landing area might be over here somewhere, right? So maybe this is my alternate strip, and at my low key point I can say, oh, the runway's blocked, I can't land there, so let me just do a, you know, a right turn, so this now becomes my base. I turn and do final, and I come in for a safe landing. You know, whatever that looks like. You know, thinking back to the words that we used to open this session, gravity's going to win. This landing is inevitable. It's just a question of what speed are you going to arrive at, you know, what altitude above the ground, and where. And there was an incident this past summer with an air cadet who landed. It was out in BC. You might have seen it in the news. He landed on top of a building. And I was chatting with an officer who runs the air cadet gliding program, and we got onto that discussion, and I said, you know, I give that pilot kudos for, you know, being able to put it down on such a small space. And he says he didn't land it, he just ran out of air. And I said, what do you mean? He says, well, he kept flying, he'd lost the runway, he just kept flying, and he didn't land the plane. The ground came up and met him. So this was a, you know, he just lucked out that there happened to be a building there at the right height and the right position for him. So, you know, we want to keep that mind active. We want to keep thinking about where we are, what our options are, and where we plan to go. And let's go somewhere we plan to go, and not kind of have it decided for us. So that's kind of our basic circuit. Now, I want to pose this question to you. When does planning start? So we've been talking about circuit planning, and that's what this session is all about. When does it start? When does planning your circuit begin? Svet Van, I'm not going to accept that answer. He says all the time, which is kind of true. But I say, when does it begin? When do you first start planning your circuit? Because you're right, you should be planning it all the time. Okay, so every moment you should have landing options. Totally agree, Svet Van. So during that entire flight, you need to be planning, but I want to know when it begins. Because what you're really talking about is the continuous process of reevaluating and updating, which totally agree with that, and thank you, it's very good. But I want to know when you start doing that process. Okay, so I'm gonna deal with a couple of these answers first. When you decide you're going to land, from Sergio, and Razvan, when you say from the high key area. Now let's back this up a little bit and let's think about that for a second. If I wait till I'm in the high key area to decide, to plan my circuit, well, here's the question for you. Are we doing a left-hand or a right-hand circuit? Because if this is depicting a left-hand circuit, if I'm doing a right-hand circuit, my high key is actually over here. So if I wait to arrive here before I start planning and then I plan for a right-hand circuit, kind of a little bit too late. Who's that? That's Pavel is saying 1,500 feet AGL. Yeah, we definitely want to tighten our plan for that. But, I'm going to deal with a couple of the answers, which is before you take off, right? You should be thinking about your circuit and planning your circuit before you take off. So when does it begin? Before you even take off. Now, let's think about this. We come out to the field, we get the planes ready, we do a briefing at the beginning of the day. And part of that briefing is, what is our circuit for today? Well, guess what? We actually started doing our circuit planning even before the first launch, right? So, lots of good answers here around, you're returning to the field, your 1,500, AGL. Those are all times you absolutely want to be planning your circuit, but you want to begin planning the circuit. And that's the key word here, is begin, before you even take off. So you want to be thinking about, okay, where am I landing? Now, whether that circuit is back at your home field or at another field because you're doing a cross country. So when you go to do your first cross country and you think, okay, I'm going to go and land at York Soaring. Well, here's a couple of questions. What runways do they have? What is their field elevation? How high above ground, or how high above sea level are they? So hence, what is your circuit altitude? What is their normal circuits that they do? How will you be able to change that, etc. So yes, we want to plan our circuit when we're 1,500 feet above the ground. As soon as we release, we're always thinking about what's our circuit, where we're going to land. But we really do start it before we leave the ground. So we should be doing this, before you take off. Okay. Now, SWAFs was mentioned. I'm just going to do a quick review of SWAFs. SWAFs is our pre-landing checklist, and yeah. So, oops, sorry, I went backwards. Hitting the wrong key here. There we go. Okay, so the S is for straps, making sure your straps are done up. This one's actually in here because a lot of people like to either loosen or take off their shoulder straps on long flights. So just make sure your straps are done up. Wheel, water, and wind. Lower the wheel, dump the water, and check what your wind is doing. And we'll go into a little bit of detail around that. Now, based on the wind, you're going to set your airspeed. Based on your airspeed, you're going to set your flaps. And most airplanes that do have flaps have a flap extension speed. So you usually have to slow the airplane down to below flap extension speed before you put the flaps out. So the next question now becomes, based on the wind and your calculated airspeed, are you going to be slow enough to use flaps, or should you do a flap up landing? And then trim and traffic. Now, trim comes after airspeed and flaps because you're going to use that to maintain your your airspeed. And then finally, spoilers. Now, there's a little bit of debate around this last entry because the question is, where in the circuit do you do your SWAFs? And I'm just going to kind of back up to this one here for a second. So where in the circuit, and I'll get you to chime in on the question chat window here, where in the circuit should you be doing your SWAFs? So your pre-landing check. I'm getting a couple answers in, so I'm gonna let a couple answers flow in first, and then we'll chat. Okay. So we've got a few answers on the downwind leg. So thinking, we're kind of trucking on down here, do our SWAFs check. Not a bad option. Now, a little caveat with that, depending upon how strong the wind is. So let's just say the length of this arrow represents the strength of the wind. So if we have a really windy day and the wind's really strong, and we'll put 2 lines here and make it nice and real strong wind. That's going to shorten the amount of time you're in the downwind leg. So, if you wait till the downwind leg to do your swaths check, it can be a little bit rushed. Okay. Now I've got a couple people who have typed in pre-high key. So kind of doing it before the high key as I'm approaching the high key. Actually, high key area, since you should be evaluating the position during the downwind leg, and I agree, Kevin, I'm a big fan of doing your swaths here or even here as you're approaching the high key. You're at 1,200 feet AGL, the lift is kind of dying on you, and you say, you know what, I'm going to go head over to my high key. You've already made the commitment to land. Let's, get the checks out of the way, right? Don't wait till the last minute. Now, having said that, I usually wait till close to my low key point to check my spoilers. So I tend to do my spoilers. Oh man, this is just ugly. I tend to do my spoilers right around this point. And my rationale around that's supposed to be a P, by the way. My rationale around that is if the spoiler's stuck open, then I could just kind of do this and come in on a shorter abbreviated circuit. If the spoilers stick closed, then I know I need to kind of do this and give myself a little bit of extra space. So, do what makes sense for you. Now, if you do your spoilers over here and they get stuck open, the rationale is, of course, you can kind of come in this way and do a downwind. Both are absolutely fine. And at the end of the day, folks, you're pilot in command, so you live with the decision that you make. But when you think about doing your spoiler check, and there's my little animation for when, doing your spoiler check, make sure that wherever you choose to do it, you have enough height to make it home. Okay. Now, just as we lead into break, what I want to do is just cover off this airspeed piece. Okay. So how do we calculate the airspeed for approach? Or how do we choose the airspeed for approach? How do we go about doing that? So I get you to just type in the question box there for this one. And Dane, you typed in preference. I don't understand what you mean by that. If you could expand on that. Resvan, you're absolutely correct. It is based on the wind conditions, but what, if you're telling me, okay, choose your airspeed based on the wind conditions, what does that mean? Like, what am I gonna put in? This is the actual formula that we're looking for. Okay, so and you're right. It is based on the wind speed and the stall speed, but how do we can kind of combine those together? All right. So it also depends on your wind direction to some extent, yes. But so the formula basically, and my apologies, I meant to put it in this slide, is 1.3 times stall. And that's stall in a landing configuration. So if you've got an aircraft with flaps, if you've got an aircraft with a retractable wheel, and then it's plus the wind and plus half of the gust. So 0.5, that's a decimal right there. So 0.5 of the gust. Okay. Now this formula has actually recently been updated, and it's 1.5 by the stall, because what they're finding is that 1.3 in the steeper bank that we do in gliders comes out of, we're starting to get a little bit too close to the stall speed when we're in that steep bank. So we want to be thinking about, what is our stall speed? Now, in very simple terms, folks, what we're doing here is we're increasing our speed when it's windy out. Okay. And this is going to do two things. One, it's going to get us a little bit more penetration into the wind. The second thing it's going to do is it's going to give us a little bit of an extra margin as we move down through the wind gradient. And I think one of our previous sessions, we talked about wind gradient. And in very simple terms, the wind is usually faster at higher altitude. And as we get lower down, the wind slows. And this is mostly because as the wind flows over the ground, it loses energy. So where I might be at, let's say, 300 feet, and let's say I've got a 40-knot headwind, as I get down to the lower altitudes, that 40-knot wind is going to diminish to, let's say, 20 knots. And because the airplane is moving through space at a certain speed, that momentum of it moving is going to want to keep it going at that same speed. And that's one of Newton's laws, the law of momentum, which is, or inertia, excuse me, where a body will remain in a constant state of motion unless acted upon by an external and unbalanced force. So what's happening is as I'm descending through the wind gradient, my airplane's going to want to stay at the same speed. So although I'll lower the nose, it'll take a few moments for it to speed up. By carrying that extra bit of speed, that will help carry me through as the headwind diminishes and my speed through the air hasn't, or my speed through space hasn't really changed yet. So if I'm flying along at kind of 50 knots and I start to lose, let's say 10 or 20 knots of headwind, and I haven't changed the overall speed of the airplane, my airspeed will actually drop. And we refer to this as wind shear. So this is where we want to get that extra bit of speed in there to protect us against that. And you'll also find that on those windier days, you're going to need that extra energy to sort of penetrate through the wind and kind of, still make it to the runway. So with that, we're going to do our break, and I'm just going to unmute everyone. So I'm just clicking down the list here. And let's just see if anyone's got any comments or questions as we go. So everyone is now unmuted except Chris Andrews, who I can't. Comments, questions, thoughts at this point?
I do have, but I think we'll delay the break. Let's just have it after the break.
Okay.
Probably.
So write that question down so you don't forget. Is there anyone else?
David?
Yeah.
Yeah, David, what you said 1.5 times the stall speed plus the wind plus what's the
half, 0.5 of gust.
Of gust.
Oh, 0.5 of gust.
Yeah.
Can I just clarify
David, just 1 second.
Sorry, Dane.
Go ahead, David. Who's going?
Dane, go ahead.
Okay. Okay. So, David, you're actually calculating this in the air, like you are? Like you do that?
So how do we calculate the stall speed?
Well, we know the stall. You look on the profile of the plane.
Mm-hmm.
You would know that.
Okay.
So then that would be a quick multiplication, or times whatever plus the wind
have
plus
to
stall.
multiply.
So
that should be done on the ground before you take off. You know what 1.5 times your landing configuration stall is. So you know that before you leave the ground. There's no calculation involved.
Exactly. And then you just add the wind. Right?
Plus half the gust. Okay, yeah. I get that.
Now, what if you don't know the stall of your airplane? How would you find that out? One way is to look in the manual.
One way is just take her right up in the air and just do it.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, what are going to be some of the things that are going to affect your stall speed?
Wind.
Weight.
Weight. Will wind affect my stall speed?
No.
It won't, will it? No. So weight will affect the stall speed. What else will affect the stall speed?
The configuration.
Absolutely, configuration of the airplane. So do I have my flaps set? Do I have the flaps retracted? Do I have the undercarriage out? That kind of thing. So a glider, let's take a two-seat glider, for example, that can carry water ballast. If you're flying with two people and they're two big heavyweights like me, and you've got full water, you've got a very different stall speed than when you've got, Jim Miller, who's a little tiny guy, flying by himself with no water, right? So you want to know what those numbers are. And yeah, your manual is a good place to start, absolutely. But you know what?
Sure.
Get to know your airplane, right? Because the other thing too is you also want to know what it feels like. What are the indicators to let you know that it's about to stall? Which we discussed in Airmanship. Dave, you wanted to chime in.
Wait.
Dave Bradley.
Who, me?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, I just want to clarify that the gust we're talking about the difference between the prevailing wind and the gust
Yes.
figure. So
Yes.
it may only be, it might say 20 knots gusting 25, but what we really mean is we add the 5, we don't add the full 25,
Right.
or,
So
the half of the
right. So let's say the
25.
winds are forecast at 10 knots, gusting 15. So you would be really adding 10 for the 10 knots wind, and then you'd be adding half of the 5, which is 2.5.
2.5.
Right? Yeah. Absolutely. So you're not going to be adding half of 15. Absolutely. Yeah. So it's the differential between the prevailing and the upper. Yeah, because otherwise you get into some really high speeds in that. Absolutely. Okay. Cool. Any other thoughts, comments before we move on? Okay. So I'm going to mute everyone. We're going to take our break. I think it was Svet Van had a question that he wants to deal with after. So please remind us. I'm going to bring our timer up. Wow. Timer, 10 minutes, there we go. And let me just make that so it's more reasonable size. There we go. Okay, so I'm going to mute myself as well. If anyone does think of something along the way, just, make a note, and we'll be back in 10 minutes. I feel like it's the final countdown. All right. Here we are. We're back. And I'm just going to unmute everyone. Welcome back. Welcome back. Chris. Oh, I can unmute you now, Chris Andrews. The heck? Chris Andrews, you there? Hello, we're back. We're back, we're back, we're back. People are making lots of noise. Hello, everyone.
I'm here.
Hey, that's all that matters.
Hello.
As long as Dave's here, we're good. All right. So, back from our break, did anyone have any questions, comments, thoughts?
I actually have something more like observation, not really a question. So there might be. I'm just not sure.
Okay.
Sorry,
Oh, someone's making lots of noise back there. Go ahead.
Someone's building.
Yeah, I just
Yeah, it was.
builder. Go ahead. I think it's Svetvan. Is that you?
Yeah, that's me.
Okay, go for it.
So I remember one of my last landings. I attempted to do it. Actually, I think I did it myself, most of it, if not all. It was really windy day.
Yeah.
With gusts, like terrible gusts. So I don't remember the exact numbers, but I think that the winds were probably like 20, 25 knots, gusting all the way to 35.
Wow, that is windy.
Yes, and so I'm on my final, and I don't have this habit to watch any instruments in my landing, and I'm not sure if that's a bad thing or a good thing, but yeah, so I'm on my final. I already trimmed myself for, let's say, 70 knots, I remember. But when on the final, I felt like I'm stuck. I just stopped, like hovering there. I was just not penetrating the air. So instinctively, I just pulled the nose down, retract the spoilers, just trying to gain more speed, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then at one point, I just heard Tom in his specific attitude yelling at me, look at your speed, what are you doing, right? And so I just quickly glimpsed it was reaching about 100 knots, I think,
wow.
at that point. And yet we didn't feel like moving at all.
Mm-hmm.
So I wasn't even sure at that point will we reach the runway. So probably the question here would be, should we really reference to the airspeed indicator during the landing, or should we focus on how the runway approaches? Where do we stand?
So I'm gonna harken back to our, I think, first or second session when we talked about airmanship, and I think we touched on situational awareness. The good things I'm hearing out of this whole thing is that, you know, I feel like you had a good situational awareness around the amount of wind that you were dealing with that day, and, you know, your progress as you you know, attempted to penetrate into the wind and kind of, you know, get the aircraft down to where it needs to be. Having said that, however, there was a bit of a loss of situational awareness because you had kind of lost awareness around what your actual speed at that time was. So, you know, you need to retain that awareness throughout, and if that's done by, you know, just knowing your attitude and feeling the airplane, that's cool. If you need to look at the instrument, then, you know, do that as well. What we don't want to do, though, is fixate, and it sounds like you might have gotten a little bit of that going because you were like, okay, I'm kind of fixating on, am I gonna reach the runway? Am I gonna reach the runway? It feels like we're not penetrating into the air. I need more speed. So, you know, you want to keep your speed as constant as possible, because one of the challenges with flying the circuit and the final approach and landing is to correctly judge whether A, you're going to make the runway or not, and B, you know, kind of, are you going long, are you going short, and that kind of thing. And people who struggle with this, typically their airspeed's all over the place. So if you have a nice constant speed and then use your spoilers to adjust your actual approach path, you'll find it much easier and so forth. But, you know, yes, you should be looking down at your airspeed periodically, and you can do that just at a quick glance. Now, having said that, when you're in the circuit, that's the only instrument I would glance down at. Do not fly your circuits based on your altimeter. So as we move forward into this and we talk about high key and low key point, and we talk about the altitudes that you should be at here, and the altitudes here, and it's kind of referenced here, and what altitude should I be here, and what altitude should I turn base, and it's saying minimum 300 feet AGL. You're not going to get those numbers by looking at your altimeter. You're going to get them by looking outside. Okay, so once you're in the circuit, I'm a big fan of head up. I'm a big fan of head up and look outside all the time, but especially when you're in the circuit, because you want to be kind of looking around, you want to be kind of seeing what's going on and so forth. Dane, you've got your hand up.
Oh yes, can you just confirm, or not confirm, can we go over the 0.5 of the gust again, because I'm not quite sure how you got that number. So
I'm just gonna pause you for just a second there.
Sure.
And I also see that Paul Carabout's joined us, so I'm just gonna unmute Paul. So Svetvan, does that answer that question for you?
Yeah, I just find it for myself being distracted to lower down my sight to the instruments. But I guess it's just a personal thing, right? Because also that's an instrument that may fail at any point in time, right?
Absolutely.
So it's not solid.
Yeah, and then you get into the whole let's recognize the instrument failure and so forth. As I remember, you came to us with some power experience, correct?
No, I had gliding experience long time ago.
That's right. Okay, so the hang glider. Yeah, no, I think I'm mistaking you for.
I had glider. I had my own solo glider flights, like about 20 hours.
Oh, okay.
But that was a long time ago. But after that, I carry over 1,000 hours, like with hang gliders and paragliders.
Gotcha.
So I know when the stall comes. I have my internal feelings how to keep the speed all the time, so not to stall.
Okay.
So that was what was working for me in that moment, this particular scenario. So that's why I'm not really learned to watch the instruments.
Yeah, no, and that's it's a good habit, I think, because having your head up and out of the cockpit is good, and it sounds like you've developed that awareness, and the fact that you went faster and not slower is also good, because of course we want to make sure we prevent the stall. Okay. Let's move on to Dane's question about the half gust. Okay, so when we saw that earlier speed where it said 30-20, right?
Yep.
And then it said G25. Okay, so the wind is 300. That's the direction. Okay, so we're gonna ignore that for the moment because we're gonna assume that it's let's just say it's lined up with the runway. So our wind is 20. Okay.
20 knots, yeah.
So 20 knots. So we would put the 20 here. So we would take our 1.5 times stall, add the 20 knots, and then now what's the gust?
25. So is it 12? Add 12 more?
No, it's actually subtract the 20.
That's what I didn't understand.
Right. So what Dave was referring to when we say 20 gusting 25, what we're actually saying is it's going from 20 to 25. So that's a difference of only 5. So what you're going to do is you're going to add half of the addition.
I got it. Yeah.
Right. So hence the 2.5, right?
I got it. Thank you.
Yeah. There we go.
Clarification is good. Thank you.
Okay. High key area. This is goal number 1. Now, if you read the book, the handout that I said, the high key tells you 700 to 800, and this is based on higher performance airplanes. So if you're flying a 233 or a Krosno or something a little bit lower performance, I would suggest 800 to 1,000. Have that little bit of extra, especially when you're early in your training. As you get more comfortable, you can start to bring it down a little bit. And of course, that assumes you have the performance to be able to do that. We're going to be opposite the upwind end of the runway. So if at Great Lakes, where we've got our east-west runway, If the wind's coming from out of the west like it normally does, we're going to be at the west end of the runway, ready to start our circuit. And I really want to highlight this piece right here, which is modify to conditions. Sorry, I'm just going to mute everyone so we don't have the background noise. So again, if you have a question or anything, just raise your hand. You want to modify to suit the conditions, and I'm really going to emphasize this through the rest of our discussion today, because we've already been discussing this, because the first modification you're going to do based on conditions is you're going to adjust your speed. Now, if the Krosno stalls at, let's say, 40, okay, which is actually, high number. So let's say it stalls at 40, right? You got me in the back, the big lead weight, right? So we take 1.5, and so 40 times half would be another 20, so we're going to be coming in at 60. Now, that's kind of our standard approach. Now, again, I'm using round numbers here just for our purposes for discussion. Then we're going to add in the wind. Now, the second that we add in the wind, we're actually modifying to suit conditions, because, if I take off and it's super calm and quiet, and then the wind picks up while I'm out flying, and I come back and it's 10 knots, then I'm gonna put a little bit of extra speed on, and that is a very simple example of modifying to suit conditions. As a slightly more extreme version of that, I've had a couple times where I've gone out west to go flying, and if you fly at Pemberton, as you take off, there's a mountain right beside you. Like it's right there. So you're going to modify your circuit based on the conditions that, I can't do a left circuit because there's a mountain there, so I'm going to do a right, this kind of thing. You need to really adjust that. So, think about the conditions, and the conditions can also mean, what's the condition of the runway? Is it cluttered? Is it clear? Do we have a whole bunch of aircraft coming in? I might decide to do a circuit on the opposite side, or this kind of thing, right? Now, the second piece is the low key point, which is our goal number 2. And this is approximately 500 to 600 feet above ground. And again, by this point, you're going to be looking outside. You're not going to actually, looking at your instrument and saying, hey, what's that instrument telling me? And it's a beam, the reference point. Now, the reference point is the point on the runway that I'm referring to, that I've kind of planned my entire circuit around. When we turn final, our reference point is effectively our aiming point. So it's what we kind of point the airplane at. And we'll go into a little bit more detail on that in a bit. Now, the low key point, and just of note here, it's the high key area and it's the low key point. Okay, so this is a more specific spot in space. It is a beam to the reference point, and this is really your key decision-making point. This is where you're going to decide when to turn your diagonal, when you're going to decide when you're going to turn your base, and again, there's that modify to suit conditions. Now, having made that decision there, yes, you are going to reevaluate it and kind of look at it as you progress. So you're going to be constantly kind of updating it and reassessing that. But this is kind of really where you solidify that that decision, and then monitor how it progresses and make some adjustments accordingly. Okay, so I asked you all to print out this diagram. Now I flipped it on its side just because it's in portrait and I kind of work in landscape here, so I wanted to kind of get it as big as possible. So our high key area, this is kind of a larger area that we have for kind of getting started. And like we say, we want to be, a beam the end of the runway, right? So there's the end of our runway, here's the wind. At somewhere around 700 to 800, if you're in a lower performance glider, if you're in a 233 or a Krosno or something like that, then 800 to 1,000. Keep in mind we can always make adjustments as we go. And of course we're going to modify based on local conditions. Now, the one piece of this diagram that I'm not really keen on is this guy right here, and we're going to be talking about that piece in a little bit of detail. But notice it says 1/2 to 1 times the length of the runway. So you're actually talking about an entire runway length away. And this is where I see a lot of students struggle, where what they do is instead of doing this downwind leg at the right distance away from the airport, they do this kind of a thing and they crowd it in too much. And by doing that, it just, it sets you up further down to, you know, kind of really, you know, give yourself trouble. So what you want to do is really set yourself up far enough away from the runway that you've got a good, you know, wide circuit, and we'll talk about how to judge that in a few moments. And Kevin, you're absolutely correct, by the way. So Kevin just typed in an answer of how to do that, and yes. And again, we'll go into that in a second. So I'm not really kind of keen on this. Now, if we think about most glider runways, they're usually in the 2,000 to 4,000 foot kind of range, which means, you know, if I'm a half to 1 times away, that can be anywhere from 2,000 feet to 4,000 feet, so like a half a mile to almost a mile, right? So I'm not a huge fan of using that method for judging it. The other method that is really, and I'm going to stress this one a lot, really bad, is to use ground references. So, you know, here's you know, Old Man Smith's barn, and, you know, this is where I start, you know, my circuit, and, you know, here's that pond. You know, that's where we turn the 45, and there's that tree that's kind of here, right? You know, and this is where I turn my base leg, right? This is a really bad way to, you know, judge your circuit. Let's put a little door on the barn here. There we go. Because what's going to happen is you're going to get so used to those reference points that when we flip and do, now this one is drawn with a left-hand circuit. If we flip into a right-hand circuit and come in this way, you don't have those ground markers to judge. Or when you go and land at another airport, you don't have those ground references. And so, you know, really bad idea to be using ground references like that for judging your circuit. Now, it's a very easy thing to do because assuming the conditions are relatively constant, you're going to be, you know, doing this over and over and over again, and you're going to be noticing that you know, always turn at that same point and so forth. So we really discourage that. And if you don't get into that habit, what you're going to find is when you do your first land out, or when you do your first landing at a foreign airport, it's going to be easy. Like it'll be just another landing. It's like, dude, no problem, I got this, right? So our high key area, again, a nice big area, and this is where we basically start our circuit. We've committed. Now, as soon as we move into this part here, we're in the downwind, we're committed to the circuit, okay? So we start flying our circuit. Get your swaths done either here or once you're in downwind, or, you know, even potentially do them out here as you're approaching the high key area. So we're in the downwind, we're approaching the low key point, and this is, again, a beam to that reference point, okay? Our reference point is really what we're looking at as we approach the runway. And now your reference point can be moved up and down the runway based on the conditions. So at the west end of Great Lakes, there's a road. So I'm just gonna draw a quick little road here. You know, there's a road with cars on it and big trucks. That's supposed to be a road. So our reference point at this end of the runway is actually a little bit further down, and you'll hear the term displaced threshold. And what we're basically saying is, you know, this part of the runway here we don't use for landing because we want to be high enough over the road. At the other end of the runway, at the east end, you know, we can be closer to the physical end of the runway than we can on the west end. So we pick our reference point, and then as we fly, we're constantly looking, you know, at that reference point. You know, we're flying, we're looking at that reference point, we're gauging our progress. And even after we kind of go past the low key area, we're still looking at that reference point and gauging, are we doing this, are we making it, you know, do we have enough height, and, you know, that sort of thing. Now, this diagonal leg piece is an interesting thing. If you look at power circuits, the power circuit looks like this. It goes out, and then it does this. Well, that's me flying a power circuit, not a good pilot. Just clean that up for a second. There we go. Oh, I love this. Yeah, this is just too much fun. All right. This is what a power circuit looks like. So the power circuit, or what's often referred to as a square circuit. Now, just want to spend a few minutes to talk about why we in gliders do this 45-degree angle cutoff. And there's a couple of reasons. So get you to just chime in on the question box and type in, why do you think we do that 45-degree cutoff leg? Okay, Dane, I need you to expand on that answer. It's a good answer. I like it. If you just want to expand on it. Okay, good expansion. Thanks, Dane. Okay, beautiful. So, excellent. So I'm seeing, there's really two main reasons for doing this. And the first, right out of the gate here, better visibility of the runway. You're able to see the runway. You can see your reference point all the time. So in the single-seaters, you're typically out in front of the wing. Excuse me, in the two-seaters, you're typically out in front of the wing. In the single-seater, you're usually kind of right at the leading edge. So when you look out left or right, you're pretty much looking down the length of the leading edge of the wing, and you really can't see behind you very well. So what basically happens is, if I continue out this way, oh gee, let me just redo that. If I continue out this way, and I'm just going to put wings on my little glider here, if I continue out this way with my eye right here, I'm trying to look back through the wing to see my reference point, and I kind of can't see that. Now, this 45 cutoff circuit actually started because of GPS tracking. And what they found was the high-time, very experienced pilots who were doing landouts, what they did is they started looking at the GPS traces of their landouts, and they noticed they were cutting off the corner of the circuit. And when they asked them why they were doing that, they said so that they can keep an eye on the the runway, because now that I turn this way, and my eye's right here, I've got a clear view of that reference point. And you notice that when you get to this point here in the circuit, we're kind of now starting to look right down the wing at the reference point. We make that next turn. Now, there's a second reason for doing this, and it was kind of alluded to here. So better visibility, allow for minute corrections from Kevin, absolutely. If you can see the runway, you can make those minute connections. But from Dane, he says height and speed, and it's actually the height which is the key, because from this point in your circuit, up until this point in your circuit, you are actually flying towards the aiming point or the reference point. If I continue out this way, I'm actually now flying away from the reference point. Now, because we're flying gliders, we're always descending. And one of the things they did when they did the analysis of this circuit is that they noticed that if they plotted height compared to distance to landing point or distance to your reference point, for this phase of the circuit from here on the downwind, as I descend, I'm also getting closer to my reference point. But if I continue out on the straight, I'm actually flying away. Now, by turning here, you notice I'm actually getting closer, and then again I turn here. So this is kind of, a straight leg version of a kind of circular circuit. And what it does is it allows me to not fly away from my landing point while I'm descending, in effect. So when you plot the heights and distances, you get two curves, or you get two lines that are actually pretty close to parallel to each other. Now, if I do the old square circuit where I went out here, what you find is I'm increasing my distance away from the reference point, and I'm still descending. And then I use this portion here to kind of gain it back. So this piece here, it's the time when we're furthest away from the reference point while we're still descending. And so what ends up happening is I get kind of into this kind of nasty situation where I'm getting lower and lower but I'm also getting further and further away. So there's actually a dual purpose to this circuit. One is to help keep our reference point in view, and the other is to help kind of line up our descent and our distance away. Now, like I said, this was originally kind of pioneered. This was originally pioneered by the guys doing landouts, and they were doing it to keep sight of a runway or a landout spot that they weren't familiar with. So they weren't familiar with the local area. So hence they were finding that if I picked my landing spot and then I flew away from it in the standard square circuit, when I did my turn and I look back and going, okay, where was I going to land? I kind of can't keep track of that. Okay, so I'm going to answer Kevin's question in just a sec. So as we're doing the circuit, by cutting off that 45, it actually makes you better enabled to judge the circuit. Now, just to finish that off, if you're going to fly a square circuit, you actually need to start it closer in, because what's going to happen is when you get into this portion here where you're flying away, you need some extra, either start it higher or closer in so that you've got that extra altitude to be able to have that sync. Okay, so Kevin says reference point defined, where we need to point the nose on final. And yes and no. At the yes part, Kevin, is that it is where I'm going to point the nose left and right, but it's not where I'm going to point the nose up and down. And if I point the nose at the reference point, at the kind of aiming point, what's going to happen is I'm going to end up diving in towards the ground, and I'm going to keep pointing down and down and down. Now the reference point should stay fixed on my canopy as I'm heading towards it. So that's that point where we refer to as the aiming point when you're on final. So kind of yes and kind of no. So you're gonna use that for your approach control. So I hope that answers it for you. And that's a discussion that we kind of need to more have on the field when we're going to go fly it. Okay. Now, distance away from the runway. And I think, Kevin, you were the one who had chimed in. Yep, you had chimed in earlier. So there's the ground, there's the runway. I'm flying my base leg, I'm flying my my downwind. How far away from the center, so if this is the center of my runway, how far away from the center of the runway should I be? I'm going to get you to type that answer in. See if you guys have been paying attention to us out on that field all this past summer. How far away from the field should we be when we're flying our downwind? That's what I was afraid of. So a lot of the answers I'm getting are based on what we were just talking about from this thing here, and I said, don't use this. Okay, so that I should have blocked that out before I sent it to you. I apologize. So we've got a couple people saying 45 degrees. Resvan, I'm not sure what you said. Oh, sorry. Not a problem. So what you should be is you should actually be at 30 degrees. Now, 45 degrees works for a very low performance glider like a 233 or a 126. Okay, and we often actually refer to that as the Schweitzer circuit. But in modern sailplanes, even the Krosno, you want to be at about 30 degrees. Okay, so what do we do if we're low? And I'll get you to type your answer in. What do we do if we're low? Brace for impact. All right. We need to move in. Okay. You're absolutely right. We can shorten our downwind. We can bring the plane closer. K7 or K13 move closer. Yeah, good one, Dave. Get closer to the runway. Move in tighter. Okay. Yeah, in short, your circuit. Yeah, I know. That was a good joke, though. I had to say it. All right. So what we want to do is we want to move in closer, right? So if we're up here at that height, then the 30 degrees is working. But if we're down lower, we're now on that shallower angle. We want to move in closer so that we get closer to the circuit, right? So we get back over on that 30-degree line. Now, here's the beauty of this method. If I'm lower, I need to be in closer because I need to do a tighter circuit. I don't have as much height to be able to do the full normal circuit. So if I kind of back up for a second, if my normal circuit is out here and I'm really low, so let's say I arrive at my high key area and let's say I'm at like 500 or 600 feet. Well, I don't have enough height to do a circuit out here. So one of my options is I can do a circuit in here and do kind of, this kind of a circuit and bring the whole thing in tighter, right? So that's one of the beauties of this method here is that if I am low, all I need to do is position myself so that I'm on that 30-degree line, and that will naturally bring me in closer. And conversely, if I'm high, it'll also push me out so that I can be at the right distance away from the field based on my current height. Now, if I'm too close to the runway, well, let's see, if we're too low, we needed to move in. If we're too close, that puts the angle too high. So, you know what, just move on out, right? And again, if I back up for a second here, so if I arrive here and I'm kind of at this point here at like 1,100 feet, or even 1,000 feet, based on our 700 to 800, well, we're kind of too high. So what I can do instead of doing my normal circuit is I can kind of start out here, and I can do a circuit that looks something like this, where I do, a bigger, wider circuit, sort of going off the map here, and now I'm going a longer distance and, using that greater distance to kind of lead off some of that height. And this is kind of at a point where, really get to know your airplane, because now I need to know, do I have the penetration? How windy is it? I want to make those kind of adjustments as we go. Okay, so let's talk wind. How does wind affect your circuit? And we actually already addressed the second question because we already talked about speed. But how does wind affect your circuit? What's it going to do to your circuit? And for this discussion, let me just kind of back up to here. There we go. And let me just clean this guy up for you. How does wind affect your circuit? What are some of the things that are going to happen if I've got a windy day? And let's assume for the first part of the discussion that the wind is actually straight down the runway. So how's this going to affect my circuit? What are some of the things that are going to happen? Okay, so our first answer from Kevin, affect your speed unexpectedly on turns. So expand on that a little bit, Kevin, because you're right, it does. I just want to kind of understand that a little bit, right? From Tom, we're going to change our approach speed, absolutely. So if I've got, if it's kind of, a nice calm 5-knot day, I'm going to come in probably around, 50, maybe 55. So let's say we're going to come in at 55. Let's say our standard approach for this discussion is 50, and then we add the wind, so that's 55. If it's 60 or excuse me, if it's 10 or 20 knots, then I might come in at 60 or 70 knots, right? So yes, I'm going to adjust my speed. What else? How else will this affect your circuit? Oh, good, there we're starting to get some answers. Get you offline. I'm not sure exactly what you mean there, Kevin. Oh, so when you're doing your turns, right? Yeah, because if I'm doing a turn, for example, this turn here, similarly this turn here, what's going to happen is that wind is going to be blowing me, this direction. So I'm going to be trying to turn here, and I get blown over further. I think that's what you're talking about. Yeah. The direction of your circuit, absolutely. So if I have a wind, if I have a slight crosswind, for example, like this, I'm going to, instead of doing a left-hand circuit, I'm going to come around and do a right-hand circuit so that my base leg is into wind. And some clubs do this, some don't. We do it at Great Lakes. I'm not sure if, I'm pretty sure Toronto does. I'm not sure about Winnipeg. There are some clubs that only do left-hand circuits. And then you've got now, assuming I stay with the left hand, if I've got a wind from the side here, what's going to happen now is I'm going to have a, a tailwind on this base leg, and that'll cause some other issues as well. What else will this do to my circuit? So again, we're going to assume we got that straight wind straight down the runway. What's it going to do to my circuit? I think my folks are running out of steam over here. I'm not getting any answers. In particular, I want to ask the question where we've got a strong wind straight down the runway. What's it going to do to your downwind leg? Beautiful. So Neil just answered, Winnipeg has 3 runways, so they choose to minimize the crosswind effects. Beautiful, yeah. So you're actually in a nice situation where you can go to a different runway and try and keep that wind straight down. For the specific question, downwind leg, it is going to shorten it, okay? It's going to speed it up. It's going to happen faster. The leg itself will be the same physical length, but the amount of time it takes you is going to be shorter. So, where it may take you normally, let's say, a minute to go down that leg, it might take you 45 seconds or even 30 seconds. All of a sudden it feels like, wow, we went down that really fast. Now, having said that, you also may arrive at your low key point with a little bit of extra altitude because of that faster getting down that leg faster. On those windy days, resist that urge to kind of really extend your final, because when you turn and head into the wind, much like Svetvan's question, you're not going to have that penetration. It's going to slow you down. You're going to need more height to get through, to get into that landing. So, and again, know your airplane, because if you're flying something like a Krosno or the K6 actually has pretty good spoilers. The Jantar has good spoilers. The L-23 has good spoilers. If you're flying, one of those types of ships, you've got lots of spoilers. So, you know what? It's that windy day. You don't have a lot of penetration into the wind. So, hey, let's make that turn to final a little bit high, and then we'll use our spoilers to kind of bleed that down. And then, of course, be careful of the illusions that you get while you're turning. So when we go for the this turn here, if I kind of scribe out this nice turn like this, the stronger the wind is, the more this turn is going to end up looking like this, where you get blown downwind, and it's going to look like you're not turning as quickly as you think you should, and there's a tendency there to push a little bit of rudder to get you turned around, and that's classic setup for a spin. And as Dave Bradley was just commenting, he said unexpected on long final because you push you sideways on base. Absolutely. So the other thing that you have is you've just turned here, you lined up nice and square to the runway, but your actual path is more like this because the wind is blowing you. And so now we're drifting away from the runway. We're going to be needing that extra height and stuff to to make sure that we get back, right? So we want to compensate for that, absolutely. So, our downwind is going to be faster. Our turn here is going to be, we might have that illusion of a skidding turn, and then we start, kicking in that extra rudder. Remember, rely on your yaw string. We get into our base leg, and we may be getting blown sideways, and we need to compensate for that. And then, of course, when we actually line up for final, it feels like all of a sudden that we just boogie and downwind, and we turn, and all of a sudden everything slows down, and now it feels like, oh my goodness, we're not even going to make the runway because it's, we don't have enough height. So, all of these things you want to, think about when you're in your circuit planning, and make sure that you make, those adjustments for it. Okay. All right, so we get into that right position, we set up on our downwind. We've already talked about our circuit speed, things like wind gradient, gusts, and then of course direction. And when we talk about direction, we're looking at that crosswind. How much of a crosswind is it? Where is it coming from? And how is it going to affect us? So I found this great little animation. Thank you, Internet. And the green line represents your actual track over the ground, while the red line represents the direction your nose is pointing. So in this scenario here, we're approaching the runway. We've got a strong crosswind from the left. We keep the airplane pointed straight ahead, and we're going to drift, and this is assuming wings level. you keep the aircraft pointed straight ahead, and what's going to happen is we're going to drift off to the side. Now, in the air, you'll see this. You'll be flying along, and you'll notice that you're pointing, towards the water tower, but you're moving a little bit to the right in this case. And here's the other beauty of the downwind leg is you'll see that same drift. So as I'm flying my downwind leg, I line up nice and parallel to the runway. I'm not tracking parallel. It's like, oh, there's a crosswind, right? So I'm going to adjust, and then I just remember which side that's coming from so that I'm prepared for that when I turn final. Now, one way to deal with this, there's actually two ways to do this. One is a forward slip and the other is crab, a side slip, excuse me. I'm kind of lean towards crabbing because you only need to, you keep your wings level, and then you only just need to kick a little bit of rudder just before you touch down, and you don't have that danger of catching a wingtip. So what we're going to do now is to compensate for the wind coming from our left is we're going to point the airplane a little bit into the wind. We're going to turn and point the airplane a little bit to the left. So we're kind of going a little bit sideways through the air. Now, Neil chimed in while we were talking about the previous, the turn to final. He says, must prepare to crab after your turns. Absolutely. So assuming we're flying and there's a strong crosswind, I'm going to see that crosswind when I'm on downwind. And I'm going to adjust and crab on downwind. So I already know the angle that I need to fly. So what I'm going to do now is when I turn final, after having experienced that, I'll just kind of make a little mental note. When I turn final, I'm just going to, turn final and line up with the same sort of an angle and, fly the airplane nice wings level with that crab angle. And then, of course, I'll make adjustments, if that crosswind either increases or diminishes or, whatever it's doing. Okay, and if we put the two together, right, so you can see in the one scenario we're drifting off to the side, and the other we've got the angle in there which keeps our track over the ground straight. And it's kind of a cool thing because you're flying along and you're looking a little bit, like 10 degrees, 30, 20 degrees out to the right of the airplane, and that's the direction you're heading. I always think it's kind of cool because the yaw string's nice and straight. You're going straight through the air, but that whole air mass is moving you sideways. Okay. Now, our final piece here that I want to just kind of talk about is where to enter the circuit. And we've been talking a lot about high key, okay? So here you are out here, or you're out here, or you're out here, and you head into that high key area, right? Now, these are the two best places to come from, is here and here. Be cautious if you're here and you're heading in because you're now crossing over the runway. Now, if you've got enough height, if you're at 1,000, 1,200 feet, no problem. Fly right on over. Just keep a good lookout. Now, what if you can't make the high key area? Well, you have other options. Like you can enter the circuit here. You can enter the circuit here by crossing mid downwind and coming in. You can even enter here and do a straight into base, or even do a straight in. Let's say you're low and you're kind of over here somewhere, and you got low, and you can do a straight in. Now, again, if you've got a radio, make that call, but give yourself options that you can come in from other directions. Okay, don't get locked into, I have to hit this, right? I was flying with a student one time and they had misjudged where they needed to be, and they actually started their circuit, over here, right, in the actual diagonal opposite, and it sort of dawned on them and they figured it out. So what they did, and remember we're now at 1,000 feet here, what they did is they tried to do this, right? Now let's think about this for a second. They're just 1,000 feet, and the wind is coming this way. Are they going to make it to high key? Right? The short answer is no. Now, here's a couple of options they had. The first option was to kind of do a circuit like this, right? Pick up the other side, so kind of backtrack this way, pick up a downwind at the appropriate height, and then come in. Another option they had was to kind of do this and pick up a mid downwind, right? So when you're sitting over here at 1,000 feet, okay, let's not focus, let's not lock into this option. Maybe this might be a better option, or even let's pick up a circuit in the other direction, the other side, that kind of thing, right? So make sure you're open to those options. Okay. Now, to kind of finish off, so what I want to basically leave this slide with is the simple message of plan and replan your circuit, right? Be prepared to modify. So if you are trucking along on downwind here, you're here, you started at, let's say, 800 feet, you're trucking along and you hit major sink and you're kind of at this point here and you're at 500 feet. Okay, you know what? Or maybe even 400 feet. You know what? I need to abbreviate my circuit and I need to do one of these. Okay? Keep those options open. Okay? Now, to finish this off, I want to just share with you a story of a young pilot, relatively newly licensed, and he was flying over at York Soaring, and this is a map of York Soaring of all their runways. So if you talk about multiple runways to change wind direction, they've got them in spades. But York is kind of funny because the clubhouse is right here, right, and the hangar and clubhouse is all kind of right here. So they like to set the operation up right here, right, because it's close and it's easy and all that kind of stuff. So the main runways that they use is 2305 and 3214, right? So this young pilot who's a licensed pilot and he's flying the 126 and having a great time, pretty much has only ever taken off north-south and east-west. And something he's never done is never changed runways. So he's always taken off, and then come into land. Okay, so I'm just going to kind of set that up for you. Now on this day, there was a wind blowing. It was kind of from the west a bit, west southwest, and so the wind, and you notice my map is kind of sideways. So the wind was kind of from here, right? So they were taking off and landing on 1-4, and this particular person was down over in this area here, thermaling and stuff, and started to head back. Well, between the 126 and the headwind and everything, it wasn't kind of going so well. So he came in and approached just like this. Now, you look at that track, and you're thinking, oh, okay, he's decided to land on runway 21. Then all of a sudden, at the last second, he does this and lands on 1-4, just like he's always done. Now, what happened with this pilot is he'd never really been taught that you can land on a different runway and that you always kind of come back. The original plan looked like this. And as he progressed back from his nice thermal at 4,000 feet, he was starting to evaluate his options, and it started with, I'm going to go here and pick up high key. Then it became a, hey, let's grab a mid downwind because I'm not going to make high key. And then it became a, let's kind of join into the the circuit here, picking up the base, thinking you can do a straight in base. And then it became a, I just got to kind of try to make it home here. But the real mistake happened right here, because this turn was done far too low to the ground. And now it was executed successfully, and he learned from that experience. But consider that you have that option of landing in a different. It would have been nice to just roll out this way, right, and continue that. That would have been the smartest thing to do once you've gotten into that situation. So if I'm going to leave you with one thing when it comes to circuit planning, is this: be flexible to options. Okay. Yes, we have our standard circuit. And if I just back up for a second here and clear this guy. Yes, we have our standard circuit. And as much as possible, as long as everything's going to plan, fly the standard circuit. But every once in a while, things don't go to plan. So make sure that you open yourself to other options. Okay. And don't get so fixated that you're going to do something silly like this. Okay. I'm just going to unmute everyone. And we went a few minutes over. I apologize, but thank you so much for your patience this evening. Okay, so everyone's unmuted. Any questions, thoughts, or comments as we wrap up to this evening? Oh, sorry, just one thing. I didn't get the quiz written yet. So normally we prepare the quizzes ahead of time. I've just been super busy at work, so I will get that written and emailed to you in the next day or two. Any questions or comments or thoughts before we wrap up and sign off?
David, Dane, you did a really good job tonight, man. You're good at the presentation, eh?
Well, thank you, Dane. I appreciate that.
Oh, you're welcome. And the graphics are good. I like the way that the plane moves, so you can see that it moved. Just moving it over was you still maintain that 30 degree. Yeah, it's really neat, eh?
I had fun with that one.
How did you? You'll have to show me how to do that. How do you do that?
Oh, the way you do it.
Do you have extra equipment for that?
No. What you do is you hire at a very expensive rate a good quality designer like myself to put it together for you. Yeah, no, I'll happily show you how that works.
That's pretty neat.
Yeah, it's kind of cool.
Now, Dave, to judge that 30 degree, is this more of a just, doing 10 times until it kind of registers what it looks like? Because I think I'd have a hard time looking out the window to the side and kind of judging what angle the runway is to me. I can tell when it's directly below me or, way out.
Yeah.
To judge 30 degree angle, it's kind of hard, I'd imagine.
It is absolutely. So that is an experience thing. Now, what I find fairly easy is judging 45.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And so there's 45, and then so you kind of judge 45, and then you move out and kind of get a feel for it. Kevin's suggesting use your arm, which works great when you're standing on the ground and you can stick your arm out. So
unless you're a short arm.
Exactly. So so practice this on the ground. Something that I do to help with this is I'll put a hat on the ground and we say, okay, that's the runway. Let's judge 30 degrees. Let's judge 30 degrees, and we kind of walk closer and further away and that kind of stuff. And I find that tends to help. But yeah, that is a bit of an experience thing.
Okay.
Any other questions, thoughts? Oh, bend at the elbow. Yeah, good one, Kevin. And you can do that. And I mean, if you really wanted to, you could bring a protractor, with you or in the car.
Feel the light.
Yeah.
Or an iPhone app.
Yeah, maybe we could get an iPhone app for this because there's apps for everything, right? Okay. I think we're good.
Okay. Thank you, David.
My pleasure. Thank you, guys. Sorry, Chris Andrews. Yes, if you could bring your camera in. Chris, if you have an SD card I could borrow, would be awesome. I have a 4 gig one. I don't know if that'll be enough.
Probably not, Dave.
What size should I bring?
Well, depending how many hours it's going to be. If it's going to be like 90 minutes.
I'm looking for about a half hour to 45 minutes.
Okay. My question to you is, if I bring a card, can we transfer it somehow? Because I can't leave it with you because I'm going away.
Okay. What size do I need? And I'll bring one.
Well, I thought the club had a bunch of them.
They might. I'm not there. I'll pick one up before I head down. So if you could just tell me what size.
I would hazard to guess 8 gig would probably be safe.
Okay, I'll get an 8 gig. Great.
All right.
Thank you for.
See you guys Saturday.
Yep. For those of you guys from GLGC, reminder: our AGM is this Saturday. It got delayed, and we'll see you in Tottenham on this Saturday. Bring your procedures quiz. Okay.
And for those of us that can't make it, unfortunately, I'm working this weekend. What's the best option for us?
The best option is just you're on the mailing list, so you'll know when we start to do our flying. For those missed the safety seminar, just contact me directly, and what we do is we arrange either an individual private session or a small group session on the field.
Excellent.
Sometime before we're flying. Yep.
Okay.
Okay, so I'm just going to stop the recording.